So, Star Wars has finished its third trilogy, and no one is angry at all, right?
Uh, this movie was shit.
That puppet was one of the worst puppets I've seen in Hollywood.
The third act is god awful.
And Ray's parents. We didn't find out who's Ray's
And Ray's parents. Like, just don't set it up like this. Again, this isn't me as a crazy fan where I'm...
Well, not much has changed. Star Wars has and always will be heavily debated among its fan base. There are many Star Wars fans that argue, oh, this is the way it should be, or my childhood is ruined by these prequels or sequels. You know, typical stuff like that. And I'm going to be a hypocrite here and talk about things I like and dislike about the new trilogy as a whole. Star Wars is not the perfect childhood adventure I remember. After watching The Rise of Skywalker, I had a different opinion and viewpoint of this whole trilogy as a whole, because watching The Rise of Skywalker and just watching all three of these movies, there was no creative vision, and it's very evident here. So I'm here to talk about my likes, dislikes, and I want to talk about the weird meshing of two directors in the new trilogy. The Force Awakens. This movie was a phenomenon whenever it came out. It was like the second coming of Jesus whenever people heard that this movie was going to be released. And it had been 10 years since a Star Wars movie, and a trilogy that, again, was, for the most part, in terms of critical reviews, the prequel trilogy was really like, the first two episodes were mixed reviews, and then Revenge of the Sith got really positive reviews. But as a whole, it's a mixed trilogy. And this one, watching the trailers for The Force Awakens, I really thought that this, and a lot of people thought that this would harken more back to the original trilogy, but in a more pandering way for me. But I still really enjoy The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens is a movie that, as time goes on, I do really still love it. Like, it's got some great moments. It's very well executed with the characters, with the story. The story is very well done. And I think that they do a great job making it a sequel to Return of the Jedi, in which the prequel trilogy looks aesthetically different. And I like that about the prequel trilogy. But this is a sequel to Return of the Jedi. It's going to continue on in a different way. The film was received well by critics and for its story, acting, scope, and visuals, and it felt like for a lot of critics it was going back to the original Star Wars trilogy, not a different trilogy like the prequel trilogy. So this, of course, got really positive critical reviews. Fan reviews, I remember whenever this came out, it was very mixed, because a lot of people didn't like that this was so close to A New Hope, and I completely see that argument, and I look at that argument, and it does hold true to me as well, because there are moments where the plot is so much the same movie as A New Hope that you look at it like it's not even its own thing in ways. And I do still love this movie even with that criticism, but a lot of fans criticized that it was similar to A New Hope. A lot of fans criticized Rey for being a Mary Sue. I remember that being a very hot topic in 2015. And so it was critically praised and I guess mixed upon fans on reception for the movie whenever it came out. For me, I love The Force Awakens, and I still do. I think it's still a fantastically well done movie that, yeah, does harken a lot to A New Hope. And I'm fine with that for the most part. Like, I'm fine with that for the most part, because the characters in this are so strong that they do even though they do the same story as A New Hope, basically, they do a great job of making these new characters so likable and charming and interesting. And I really, really love that. I appreciate that so much that they did that in this new trilogy, in this first episode. I love the mystery aspect, too, of going back into this world of you not knowing what has happened in 30 years. I think that does build upon this very, very well. And this is a mystery trilogy, I guess, kind of. I guess, air quotes, because I'm going to talk about each film, and some of them are not the same in terms of the intentions, but Force Awakens is a mystery movie. It was building upon this mystery of these characters. The galaxy is at war again. Luke Skywalker is missing. Leia is active in the fight, while Han runs away from it. And new villains Kylo Ren and Snoke take over the galaxy, leading the First Order, spreading fear and power throughout the galaxy, while a scavenger and a rogue stormtrooper find their place in this story. Let's talk about the main characters. Our new main hero is Rey, who is a character that has a past she knows nothing about, and I immediately sympathize with her. With Daisy Ridley's performance and the way that she portrays this character, and with the writing, you really feel for this character, and you really do understand how well of a character this is, because it's very fascinating to see this character who knows nothing of her past having to try to figure out, the only thing she wants is to be with her parents. That's it. She wants to be with her parents. She wants them to come back, and that's it. And I like that. I really love the fact that Rey has nobody and she is a nobody. I like too, there's a moment in the movie where Rey is cleaning off parts, and she looks over and she sees an older woman who's doing the exact same thing, and realizing that this is what I'm going to become if I don't find my parents. And I really like that. I think that that's a great moment of just a character, like a great character building moment, because this character, without dialogue too, I think that's a really well done moment. FN2187, Finn. Now, this character has an incredible setup. I really love the setup of this character with no dialogue at all. This character is a stormtrooper who one of them gets killed, and he goes over this stormtrooper, and the stormtrooper wipes the blood onto his helmet, and then without dialogue again, Finn just starts looking around with this helmet on. So you don't even see any emotion on it, but you know every single thing that he's going through. And you see this character holding up his gun like Phasma tells them to do, and then puts it down and just realizes what he is doing. And I really think that again, the setup is incredible. I really love the setup for Finn. I think it is fantastic. It works very, very well. Everything you know in his head that is going on is so well executed without even a word of dialogue or even showing emotion on his face. I think that is a very cool thing that they did in this movie. Poe Dameron, he presumably dies and comes back and is a cocky pilot. That's pretty much all I could say about Poe in this movie. There's not much else to say about Poe Dameron. But he gets the spotlight in The Last Jedi, so that's fine. Right now, it's just he's not very important in this movie. He's in it, but he's great. Oscar Isaac's awesome. But he's not that important in this movie. Kylo Ren, a Darth Vader wannabe. We get a mystery surrounding him, and he is a very intimidating presence before that. And they do a fantastic job of making you see this faceless villain, and whenever you have this faceless villain revealed to be Han Solo's son and to just be a normal-looking guy, I think that it really plays with your expectations of what this trilogy was going to be, because Kylo Ren wearing a mask, you would expect it's like somebody burnt up, like Darth Vader, but it's just a Darth Vader wannabe. And I think that this character in particular, and the whole trilogy, I love. I think he's fantastically well written, and his acting by Adam Driver in all three of the movies are fantastic, and he is so well done. And he had
that mighty Skywalker blood.
Now we bring back the crew from the original trilogy, but the character in this movie that gets the spotlight is Han Solo. Han Solo comes back with Chewie, and even though this movie is about these new characters, it is as important to have Han Solo in this movie, because of course being the father of Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, and also him showing Rey and Finn into this journey, into this world, and introducing them with a character from the old trilogy, but in a way where it feels like it's integrated so well and so interestingly that this character, Han Solo in this version, is great. And Harrison Ford is awesome in this movie. He gives some really great emotional moments towards the end of the movie before his death. He really portrays this character in a way where you didn't expect. More than just a smuggler from the original trilogy, this character has a son now and has this emotional moment of losing him, and he knows he's gone. And that moment where he goes up to his son before he's murdered.
Ben! Take off that mask. You don't need it.
What do you think you'll see if I do?
The face of my son. That's what Snoke wants you to believe, but it's not true. My son is alive.
It's fantastic. Leia's in this movie too, and she's used very scarcely. And again, like Poe, she is way more integrated into The Last Jedi. And I don't mean that as a bad thing in The Force Awakens, that Leia isn't in this that much. She's not a character in this movie that needs to be here as much, if that makes sense. Just like Luke. Luke and Leia are really not as important in this movie as Han. But they tried to do it in each episode of this new trilogy, where this one's about Han Solo, Last Jedi's about Luke, and Rise of Skywalker was going to be a lot about Leia, but she, of course, Carrie Fisher passed, so you didn't see the full movie about Leia, but still, those two are not as important, Luke and Leia, in this movie, and I like that. I think that that's really cool to have a movie without them as much, in a sequel to the original trilogy. They did a good job with each film having one of the main three in each of their films and then having them die in each of the films. But I think that it works very well just having Han Solo as the lead of the old characters in this movie. I gotta give a mention to BB-8. Adorable, great design, a design that's still so memorable. I can't believe that they made this design and we never saw it before in Star Wars. A rolling ball droid, that's so cute, and he just got some great funny moments. The movie is beautiful too. There are so many grand shots that rival almost any other Star Wars movie at the time, where like there are so many beautiful shots that are just the way they portray the cinematography in this movie. It's really, really cool. It's like the world is used. It's like a used world, the way that they show everything in this world, and it is a very beautiful looking movie. And it's very similar to the original trilogy, but I feel like it's still on its own with just how it looks cinematography wise in this movie.
Last Jedi!
This film is still actively raping childhoods and causing Star Wars fans to rage. It's also a movie that's considered so bad by the purest Star Wars fans that critics thought it was better than The Force Awakens, and The Force Awakens already had great critical reception, and The Last Jedi was considered great by critics by its direction, acting, writing, pacing, scope, cinematography, and emotional weight. And it's also a movie that fans just can't accept. There are some fans that cannot accept this movie. And I'm not going to say that I don't understand from other franchises that I understand why somebody wouldn't like this, but I understand why somebody wouldn't like any Star Wars movie. But I feel like this movie just gets... I've never seen an amount of hate for a movie that ever felt so unwarranted. I just can't. I don't understand, and I'll explain all the arguments that I've heard because I do not get them. I do not understand the arguments for The Last Jedi. I think The Last Jedi is an incredible movie. It's also just a movie where fans just could not accept what Rian Johnson did, and by that I mean they couldn't accept that their fan theories were bullshit, or that this movie decided to take risks. Whether you love or hate these risks, this movie took risks. This movie actually gave fans something to talk about. Whether you like or dislike this movie is still talked about after 3 years, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that even if you love or hate this movie, it is still being talked about, no matter what. And I think that really makes a movie memorable, whether you think it's good or bad. I think it's great. Some people think it's terrible, but I love how it's just so memorable to everybody, whether or not you love it or not. Rian Johnson is still getting death threats to this day for a film that he is still insanely proud of. And I really love that. I really appreciate that. I appreciate that a guy can go out and do his own vision, and like every Star Wars movie after George Lucas's 6 films is somebody else's vision. I really love that. I think that that's great. And I love that he's still a trooper because he doesn't let people get him down. Because what are these fanboys going to say? They're just saying that this movie's bad. Doesn't matter. He made the movie he liked, and that's how it went. Just like how George Lucas made the prequels. A lot of people hated the prequels. I grew up with the prequels. I love them. But a lot of people, like, just like this movie, like The Last Jedi, there's always going to be that set of Star Wars fans that are always going to find something in a certain movie or in all the movies after the original trilogy that they're going to hate. And they're just going to hate and send death threats and be absolute lunatics for no reason. The reasons that I hear fans say The Last Jedi is a bad movie, to me, don't make sense from a critical standpoint, but from an emotional standpoint. There are a lot of people who say that this is a dog shit movie. This movie is awful. It's atrocious. And I hear that a lot. And then whenever I hear the arguments, it's usually just hashtag not my Luke Skywalker, because Luke isn't what he was like in the original trilogy, and it's been 30 years. Or my fan theories are bullshit now, because I spent 2 years, spending time thinking about these fan theories, and then none of them came true, and Rian Johnson gave us something that we didn't expect, whether you like it or not. So you get those two theories, that people hate Luke's interpretation, or their theories were bullshit. So those are the usual arguments I hear from an emotional standpoint from fans. When fans say it's a bad movie, I don't see that critically. I don't really see fans say critically that this is a bad movie. They just say it more from an emotional standpoint, which if you hate it, you hate it. But I just don't. Whenever I hear people say it's a bad movie, it's almost always that. It's never the filmmaking. It's always just, I wanted it this way. You know what I mean? The Resistance is at odds. They are being tracked through hyperspace while Rey goes and finds Luke Skywalker and tries to get him to help. First off, this is a movie about change. J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson are two very different directors when it comes to directing. J.J. wants nostalgia. Look, there's the Falcon. Look, there's Han Solo. Look, there's the flying training ball. Rian Johnson wants to tear down nostalgia, and I mean that in the best possible way. This is one aspect of his directing that I understand, because again, I understand the hate, because I understand that people want something to go a certain way, and then this doesn't go a certain way. And I was fine with that. I love this movie. I love the way they went. I love the execution of this. But there were a lot of people that didn't like where it went. This movie gave me all the emotions I could ever feel about a Star Wars movie. And it didn't ever feel cynical. Even though I love The Force Awakens, it was very nostalgic in a way where it got a little grating every once in a while. If Rian Johnson does nostalgia, like Yoda being in the movie, for example, it's there to truly move the characters forward rather than just to show you, look, there's something that'll make you go, ooh, cool. Compared to The Force Awakens, which was a mystery-building movie, this one is telling you that the mysteries are solved or do not matter anymore. Instead of Rey having to rely on her parents back to make her whole is gone, she is a nobody, and especially because Rey is stronger because she learns the fact that she's not from anybody. She learns that she is not part of any heritage from a powerful Jedi. She just learns that she is herself, and she becomes a stronger character because of that. And I love in this movie that makes Rey a very compelling character, because you learn that she's not important in this movie. Wait until the next one. Snoke was built up as the big bad in The Force Awakens, and I love the fact that they kill him in this movie. I love the fact that you don't have to rely on the movie cliches or the Star Wars cliches with the Emperor dying, with Count Dooku dying, with Darth Maul dying. Like, you don't follow that trope where, like, it's kept throughout the trilogy, if that makes sense. Because the prequels did it where they had a new bad every movie. And in the original trilogy, they did too. I mean, the Emperor was the big bad. But in this movie, I love the fact that they erased the fact of any other villain besides Kylo Ren. It's just Snoke is killed because of Kylo Ren, because of what he has done to Kylo Ren, how Kylo Ren feels about Snoke, and it works as a great basis for a character standpoint of Kylo Ren changing. Well, not truly changing, but becoming a different person because he kills his master. And it also makes Rey and Kylo form this bond because of doing this together, that it makes their relationship even more complicated. I think a lot of people disregard the twists in this movie because they're like, oh, in The Force Awakens, these characters were introduced, they got killed off, it doesn't matter. And I love that it doesn't matter. I love the fact that you get these characters and in The Force Awakens, and then in this one, they are killed, but to function the story, not to make you have the typical cliches. Like I said, with Snoke being there and being killed, it makes for the fact that you have the character build up and development of Rey and Kylo. And also, this just the second movie killing the big bad in a trilogy. Like, I think that really is a great move. Even though it made probably a worse fact for the next movie, but still, in this one movie, I think that they do a great job of killing off the big bad, so you don't know who would be the big bad next. Oh wait, it should have just been Kylo Ren, but I'll get to The Rise of Skywalker a little later. After Snoke is killed, I've got to mention that scene between Rey and Kylo Ren is one of the best scenes in any Star Wars film, where they cut Snoke in half, and then they fight the Praetorian Guards together, and then after they're all killed, you've got the scene of Kylo saying,
It's time to let old things die. Snoke, Skywalker, the Sith, the Jedi, the Rebels, let it all die. Rey, I want you to join me.
and going up to Rey and having her join him.
Please don't go this way.
No, you're still holding on! Let go!
It is one of the best moments in the whole franchise. The fact that you get all these revelations right now. Snoke is killed, the revelation that Rey is a nobody.
Do you want to know the truth about your parents? Or have you always known? And you've just hidden it away? You know the truth. Say it. Say it.
They were nobody.
The dead in a pauper's grave in the Jakku desert. You have no place in this story. You come from nothing. You're nothing. But not to me. Join me. Please.
And I just thought the way they executed that, the writing, the way they executed it is incredible, because you have the fact that these two characters are basically two halves of a protagonist. They both can be what they're going to become or be different, because Rey leans towards the dark side in this movie a little bit, and Kylo leans a little bit more towards the light whenever Rey tells him his future. The scene is very reminiscent of Revenge of the Sith with Anakin and Padme too, which I love because I love that scene as well. For me, The Last Jedi is an incredibly ambitious movie for a Hollywood blockbuster, and for me, it's easily, out of the three in this new trilogy, the one that easily warrants the most to exist, and the one that begs you to ask questions more than just getting fan service. On to characters. Rey from The Force Awakens wanted her parents to come back. She was so fixated on having her parents come back, and she goes along on this journey with Finn and Han and Chewie, and learns that she has powers, like she's got the Force. And I love the fact that she, in this at the end of The Force Awakens, goes to find Luke, and whenever you realize in this movie that Luke doesn't want to help, you have the idea that Kylo Ren has to nurture her. He's the one who has to tell her the truth and tell her the story about Luke, tell her a story about how he is struggling. And I love the fact of these two characters bonding. And Rey is just, whenever she gets that revelation, like I said, about her realizing she's a nobody, she becomes a better character. And she's already a great character already. But because she learned the fact that she is from nothing, and she is that powerful, she can become even more powerful because she's got a powerful heart. She's got a powerful soul. And I just think that, it sounds really cheesy saying that, but it to me makes it a way more better explanation than she's related to somebody powerful. She also becomes the new symbol of hope, like Luke Skywalker was in the original trilogy. Luke Skywalker basically does, by the end of the movie, hand Rey this baton of being the new source of hope. The scene in particular in the underground cave is great, where Rey goes and is searching the darkness to try to find who her parents are. And then she goes up to this mirror and then touches it and realizes that two people walk towards it in their reflection, but then it's just her. And I think that that moment, too, is foreshadowing, of course, what happens later in the movie, but that is a great moment of just this character learning who she is and building on going to talk to Kylo Ren through the Force connection. Also, the scene of Luke teaching Rey about the Force, because Rey doesn't really know what the Force is. She just learned about it in the last movie. And Luke teaching Rey what the Force is one of the best scenes, I think, in any Star Wars movie. The acting is impeccable in this scene. Kylo Ren. In The Force Awakens, he was scarcely developed in a good way. He was this mystery of a character that you realize is just a cowardly person behind a mask who wants to so badly go to the dark side. And I really love how in The Force Awakens you don't know much about him. You just know that he killed Han Solo, so we don't like him. We hate him because he killed his own father. And Rey and Finn hate him because he killed Han Solo. And I really love in this movie how they delve into Kylo Ren. He was being trained by Luke, and the decision Luke makes to hesitate to kill Kylo is a moment in itself that is just a shocking revelation that works so incredibly well. And I love the first scene of Kylo Ren in this movie where he goes up to Snoke wearing the mask, and Snoke tells him to take that ridiculous thing off. And he says to Kylo,
You were unbalanced, bested by a girl who had never held a lightsaber. You failed!
And then after he tells him this, again, Kylo gets his mask and goes and destroys it. And Kylo becomes a different person because of this. Because he was just ashamed for wearing this mask and killing his father, but still being bested by Rey, who never had a lightsaber before. He is still a villain, but he is a villain that has a different lying loyalty at the end of the movie, because he is still wronged as a character with Luke doing what he's did, and he is still wronged, and he is still a flawed villain. But by the end of the movie, he changes and becomes something much different. Rey and Ben gain a Force connection, where they can see each other from anywhere in the galaxy. This is an incredible addition to the franchise, and one of the coolest plot things in this new trilogy, because they can connect to each other from anywhere, because they are kind of true halves of a protagonist, like I said earlier. They're both equal in the Force and are growing powers, and they're leading on opposite parts. So like I said, Rey is kind of leaning towards the dark, and Kylo Ren is kind of leaning towards the light whenever she tells him about his future. And it's excellent writing where you sympathize with the hero and the villain at the same time, giving them both ample character development at the same time, using this Force connection. It really builds on making these characters get even more on complicated terms, but just doing a fantastic job of writing these characters and giving them a connection where they both learn at the same time. I think that is so incredible. All right, let's talk about the big one. Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker in this film is fascinating. It's been 30 years since he saved the galaxy in Return of the Jedi, and now being the last Jedi, he is met by Rey and does not want to help. In The Force Awakens, he is not shown until the end of the movie, and he had been hiding and letting the war rage on without him and letting Han die. So, I guess if you want to blame somebody for Luke being what he is, blame J.J. Abrams, because J.J. Abrams left Luke on this island while Han died and while the war was raging. So I don't get why people get mad at just The Last Jedi, because The Force Awakens did that too. Luke's not in the movie until the end of the movie, where all of his friends and family are dying, just out in the world. He's just hiding. So it wasn't just Rian Johnson that came up with this idea. It was both of them. Like Obi-Wan or Yoda, Luke exiles himself on the island, and it's fascinating to see Luke give up, because for me, it's an interesting decision that I thought, reading it on a script, I don't know if you would look at it like it would work until you see the finished product. And Mark Hamill, of course, like a lot of fans, had trepidation about this interpretation of Luke Skywalker. I'm not going to deny that, because he did not like this interpretation. But he said, I'm going to step up and just do it, because this is not my character anymore. My character can't just be who I decide, because I'm not the one doing it. And also, George Lucas did his character, so it's like Mark Hamill just went, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go and do this performance, even if I don't like or agree with his thing. For me, it's weird, because a lot of fans hate this revelation that Luke Skywalker gives up and he almost kills Kylo Ren. But for me, 30 years later, after the original trilogy, Luke Skywalker saved his father. He saved the galaxy. All the Jedi are dead except for him. He for 30 years lives with this idea of he is the last Jedi. He is the person who has to keep this going. And he tries to train a generation of Jedi. And then he realizes that Kylo Ren, in one of the best scenes in any Star Wars movie, realizes that Kylo Ren, like his nephew Ben, is going to kill everything. He's going to kill all of his friends and family. And Luke, in a moment of hesitation, like he did in Return of the Jedi, whatever he used the dark side, whatever Luke turned towards the dark side, he does the same thing here, where he looks at Kylo and debates on killing him. But he debates on killing him in a way that's logical, because he is his nephew, but if he doesn't kill him, the whole world is going to be, again, the whole world is going to be in turmoil, and his friends and family are going to die. So he has that moment of hesitation, and this scene just, again, is fantastic.
Snoke had already turned his heart. He would bring destruction and pain and death and the end of everything I love because of what he will become. And for the briefest moment of pure instinct, I thought I could stop it. It passed like a fleeting shadow. And I was left with shame. And with consequence. And the last thing I saw were the eyes of a frightened boy whose master had failed him.
If this character came back 30 years later and did no character change, did the exact same thing he did in the original trilogy where he's like, I'm going to help, that would have been a big disservice to his character, I think, because his character in the original trilogy is the symbol of hope, yes, but he leans towards the dark side in a lot of moments where he rages, and I love the fact that he is a human character. This character makes flaws, and that's the reason why, close to the end of this movie, whenever Yoda comes and tells him that, like the Jedi before him, Luke made a mistake trying to kill Kylo or debating on it. I love that, and I love the fact that it harkens back to the Jedi. It harkens back to what Luke did in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, where he debated on turning to the dark side, where he used that in anger and in spite. But in this, it was in fear of having his nephew grow up and kill everybody. So I really, really love that they made Luke this flawed character. I've never seen Luke as a godlike character, and I know in the expanded universe they say he is, but I never thought that, and I think that it would have been a disservice to him, like if he was just this overpowerful god, like, and just destroyed everything. Like that would have been to me just such a disservice if he did that, and if he came back 30 years later and had no character change. This makes this character interesting. It makes this character good. It makes this character well written. This is the best interpretation, I think, that of Luke Skywalker that we've ever gotten. Mark Hamill's performance is chilling. I also love that he throws the lightsaber too at the beginning of the movie, because most people don't remember that in Return of the Jedi, whenever Darth Vader goes up to him and tells him to fight him, Luke immediately throws it in an immediate sense of, oh yeah, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to fight you because then I'll turn to the dark side. And in this movie, he throws it from Rey because he knows, I'm not part of this anymore, because of everything that he has used with the lightsaber in the original trilogy was never anything happy. Luke just threw that away in The Last Jedi because, of course, he never had a happy life because of the lightsaber. And this random girl pops up and just brings him back his lightsaber. I'd do that too. His send-off is very much like Obi-Wan's. He takes everything he knows that Ben is arrogant, and he uses that to his advantage. He knows that Luke is very cunning as a character, and in this movie, this feels so much like Luke Skywalker in how, at the end of the movie, where he goes up to Kylo Ren and fights him, and Kylo doesn't realize it because Kylo is that arrogant. You have the fact that he is not there using an illusion to fight him, or to be there, and then you realize the fact that Luke is here saving the day like Obi-Wan did, where he sacrifices himself for the next hope. And I really love that. It's like poetry, like George Lucas said. It rhymes. I love too the fact that this makes Luke in the way where he is he's not forgiven by Ben, Kylo Ren, but he says to Ben like he's sorry about doing this, and I love that, and I love seeing him take, like Yoda said, to go and face Ben. Finn in The Force Awakens was a stormtrooper that went rogue and ran away from the cause to go and find Rey. Rey was his most important thing in The Force Awakens that he wanted to find, because you guessed he had feelings for her, and he really, really wanted to find Rey in The Force Awakens. And at the end of the movie, Finn is injured in The Force Awakens and wakes up, and Rey is gone. And in this movie, it's about how Finn in the first movie wanted to run away from the cause, from either being on the good side or the bad side. He just wanted to run. And that scene in The Force Awakens where he ran away and then eventually came back to Rey. And in this movie, the point of Finn in this movie is learning to care for the cause. And I really like that. And it's a character that, after The Force Awakens, where do you really take this character, really? There's not much I could see that would have worked, and I thought that this worked fine, that he went and had Rose as kind of the angel on his shoulder, with DJ as like the devil on his shoulder, and using that as like him trying to figure out the world, figure out where he is in the world. I think they do a good job of it. He even tries to sacrifice himself at the end of the movie, where Rose does intervene and save him. But I like the fact that by the end of this movie, Finn, from trying to run away in the Force Awakens to finally be willing to sacrifice himself at the end of The Last Jedi. I think that really is a cool evolution of the character. Poe Dameron, he was the cocky pilot in The Force Awakens, and he didn't have a lot to do besides be a cocky pilot. And in this one, I really like the fact that the movie starts with a big action scene, and it's something that you think would be at the end of the movie. And you have Poe go up against a dreadnought, screw up, kill a lot of people, and disobey Leia's orders. And I really like how in The Force Awakens he's a cocky pilot, and in this he's a cocky pilot who realizes the error of his ways and learns from his mistakes. And I think that again, Rian Johnson does a great job of building these characters and knocking them down in a way where it just is very smartly done. And again, Poe is a character, where could you go with after The Force Awakens, really? And I think this is the best possible option. I really like what they did in Poe in this movie. Also having Leia be the connecting character to Poe, because in The Force Awakens both of them were not very prevalent. I like that they both are a team here. And I really like the fact that he screws up and Leia shows him the error of his ways, along with Holdo as well.
You're demoted.
We took down a dreadnought.
At what cost? There are things that you cannot solve by jumping in an X-Wing and blowing something up. I need you to learn that.
There were heroes on that mission.
Dead heroes. No leaders.
Leia, continuing on with the leadership like her mother before her, Leia is still going for the cause. Leia is still out there and trying to keep the cause alive and keeping hope alive. The movie is interesting because it also plays with your expectation of Carrie Fisher, because she died before this movie was even released, but her parts in the movie were filmed already. But Carrie Fisher passed away before the movie was released. So the movie does an interesting job of playing with your expectations of whenever Leia gets, like the hull of the ship gets shot at and she flies out. And I love the fact that because Carrie Fisher was dead in real life at this time, whenever this movie came out, I like that they had the moment of Leia going and using the Force for the first time, seeing it for the first time, fully, being able to fly through space, which I thought was a very, very cool image. I really, really loved in Leia's last moment of need. She has this almost instinct of a Force ability that any Jedi can have. And I really think that that's just a beautiful moment of her flying through space. I think that's very, very cool. And I do like how that foreshadows Holdo destroying this Star Destroyers, because Leia floats through the hologram Star Destroyer. I think that's pretty funny too. The moment at the end of the movie where Luke and Leia reunite is heartwarming and heartbreaking, and I think that it's also really funny. It's a moment where these two characters in this new trilogy have not had interaction with each other, because the Force Awakens starts, Luke's missing, Leia's doing the cause, and then in this movie Luke comes back as a projection though, but he comes back and talks to Leia, and that moment between them, I love when they meet again and Luke is about to speak to her, and her first reaction is, I know what you're going to say. I changed my hair. And I just thought it was such a funny moment because it feels so Leia, but it also feels so Carrie Fisher. And I felt like that was such a heartwarming moment, even though it's a goofy moment on purpose. I really like that character beat. That's a really great character beat of her. And I love so much with her and Luke because they don't have any screen time except for this moment in the movie where Luke goes up to Leia and tells her that at the end for both of us, because she thinks it's the end too, like they've lost the war. I love the fact that they both say that that Ben is gone, he is lost, and I really like that. Even she knows that, and Luke says no one's really gone, no one's ever really gone, and he goes and fights Kylo, and I think that it's just a great moment for both of these characters, with the mother and with the uncle of this kid who's gone bad. I think it works very, very well. This was Carrie Fisher's last role in her lifetime, and it was a really fantastic way to go. I felt like the last scene of her in this movie really solidified how Leia and Carrie Fisher was. It was a really great, beautiful moment.
How do we build a rebellion from this?
We have everything we need.
Rose Tico is the newcomer of the group. The new, I guess, Lando? And I'm air quoting that because she is the new fourth character because you got the three main characters, and you've got this new side character, which kind of like Lando is what the original trilogy was equivalent to. And Rose is a character that really goes through all the emotions in this movie. She goes through loss, love, seeing the hardships of everybody involved, seeing the hardships of watching this resistance crumble, watching her sister die, going with Finn, who was going to desert everybody, to changing his mind, to making Finn care about the cause. And I think that this character is great. I really like her a lot. And I think Kelly Marie Tran did a great job. And I feel so bad that this actress in real life got horribly mistreated by the loser trolls online because they thought she was annoying. And it really, I never thought she was annoying. And it honestly pisses me off that we live in a world where people can dislike a character and go and send her death threats. That's absolutely fucked up, and I don't understand why in the world people would do that. But, you know, I like how she immediately loses her sister in the opening, which in itself I want to talk about. It's a beautiful moment in the movie where just you have no dialogue, and this character, Paige Tico, Rose's sister, is holding onto this emblem, knocks down this thing to grab this remote detonator to drop down these bombs, and it is just an incredibly beautiful moment for an actress who doesn't even say anything, for all just emotion watching this scene of blowing up and sacrificing herself. Rose is the forming of the sister that is gone, and now she fights for her sister, and she fights for this cause because of that. It works so well whenever you see this scene of her sister dying and then showing her saying this to Finn, that her sister just died.
I'm taking you to the brig and turning you in for desertion.
I was not deserting. I told you that—
My sister just died, protecting the fleet. And you were running away.
They shall find me and be safe.
You're a selfish traitor.
Holdo, Laura Dern the badass. I love this character too, and this character got shit again. I loved Laura Dern in this movie. She's always awesome, but she really does a great job. And I know she's the side character category of this movie, but I have to bring her up. I thought that she was so memorable for what she was in this movie, and I really loved her so much, and she is just so awesome, and she's one of those leader characters that doesn't tell Poe anything. And for me, whenever you look at that, I like that it teaches Poe a lesson, that despite him not knowing anything and her hiding it from him, I think that it makes sense, and it shows really just the growth of Poe, and it makes sense to keep him going. And I think that she is just an awesome character, and she really works. Also, like Paige Tico in the opening, Holdo sacrifices herself as well in one of the absolute best edited scenes in any Star Wars movie, and this is one of the most thrilling moments in any Star Wars movie, where Holdo jumps into hyperspace at the moment where Finn and Rose are about to be executed, at the moment where Rey and Kylo Ren are force-pulling the lightsaber and breaking it apart. That moment of editing was just, in the score, John Williams' incredible score, gives me chills every single time. The movie is about change, but also about failure. Poe fails in the opening, killing a lot of teammates. Rey fails to redeem Kylo Ren. Finn and Rose fail to find the codebreaker. Luke fails at trying to save Kylo Ren and inadvertently creates him. And Ben fails at pleasing Snoke and having Rey join him. I think the use of failure in this movie I think is great, and learning from that failure is such a lesson that's known like anywhere in movies, but I think that this movie just does an incredible job of showing that your heroes, your childhood heroes, like these Star Wars characters, can grow and become something else. They're not just these inevitable gods that are perfect, and I really like the way that they interpret failure in this movie. But with all this said about the movie, I really love the fact that this one movie, because Rise of Skywalker kind of just doesn't, it kind of sideswipes it like everything else in the movie. But I like the fact that in this movie, there's the idea that anyone can use the Force. And I think that that idea in itself is very cool. And it does harken back to the Star Wars prequels, where they talk about a midi-chlorian count, and like everybody's got it. Or in A New Hope, whenever Obi-Wan says that the Force is just everybody. It's a being of life that flows through you. And I think that this movie felt so logically connected with that, but just anybody could use the Force. And that scene of the kid at the end of the movie, the broom kid, is such a cool just moment of showing that anybody could be a hero. And I love that idea of this movie, and I wish it was executed more in The Rise of Skywalker. You don't have to be part of a special family like the Skywalkers or the Palpatines in Rian Johnson's version of this movie. You can be special on your own. You can use the Force. People, if they are strong enough to will it, they can use it. And I just really love that idea. The way these characters learn and grow is some of the best writing in any of the Star Wars movies. You can tell with every cinematic frame, every character beat, every action sequence, and every emotional moment that Rian Johnson is truly a mega fan of Star Wars, and he put as much care and love to it as any other person would. And I just don't get why people hate this movie. I don't. And with all the explanations I've given, I feel like they're reasonable. I don't understand why people dislike this movie. I don't. And I've heard every argument. I think it's all stupid. He made this movie a truly fresh Star Wars movie in a sense where it's only kind of in its own thing, this one movie, because the next movie is not directed by him, and it's still connected in the next movie, but it's not really about what special things Rian Johnson put in this movie. So it's a shame that this is a one-off in that, using these story elements that really work and are really smart and clever, and then they're just kind of negated to the next one. Speaking of the next one, The Rise of Skywalker. It's so weird how history repeats itself.
Yeah, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
So let me start off talking about the similarities between The Rise of Skywalker and The Return of the Jedi in terms of critical consensus, because you look at the original trilogy, and A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back have garnered critical praise. And then you look at Return of the Jedi, which did not get critical praise. It got mixed reception. And then you get this new trilogy where you have The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi that got high critical praise. And then you've got The Rise of Skywalker, which, like Return of the Jedi, is mixed. And I think that it's so funny that history repeats itself that way. The only Star Wars movie in the trilogies that actually got positive reviews was Episode 3. And also, Episodes 1 and 2 didn't get positive reviews. They got mixed reviews. So it's so funny to see the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy have two very critically praised movies, and then one that's really not. It's just whatever of a movie. And I think that that's fascinating. Now, fan reception for this movie is all over the place. I am really fascinated by this movie. Whatever I think about this movie, I think it is fascinating, just like The Last Jedi, because this is one of those movies where we're in a day and age where people can bitch about something enough to where the next movie is going to be safe. It's going to be a safe movie. And you could argue that The Force Awakens was a safe movie. And then The Last Jedi was a movie that, love it or hate it, was not a safe movie. It was a movie that actually played with your expectations, gave you something different, gave you something that made you think about the world of Star Wars. And also it's a movie that, whether you like it or not, it is still talked about. And then you get The Rise of Skywalker, which is a movie that is very much on the basis of being a very, very safe movie. It is the most safe Star Wars movie. There are no stakes in this movie. There are literally, they do so many things in this movie to not erase The Last Jedi, but to course correct it, I guess, because whether or not you like The Last Jedi, you look at that movie like it felt like it was complete, and it was complete with those character beats, with Rey realizing that she's a nobody, and then in The Rise of Skywalker, no, that's not the case. Stuff like that, and it's very interesting seeing going from Last Jedi to Rise of Skywalker and kind of rewriting everything. And I think it's more because the fans bitched enough. Not because the movie was bad, but because the fans were selfish and didn't want the movie to go that way. The Last Jedi. They didn't want The Last Jedi to be the kind of movie it was. So Disney actually caved. And that's really sad. I'm actually really sad because they made a movie that's so forgettable. The Rise of Skywalker. There's moments that I really like. But as a whole, this movie is really forgettable. The most safe and most boring Star Wars movie because the fans bitched about The Last Jedi. You can't do anything different. And now they did the most safest Star Wars movie they could in the whole franchise. Funny enough, when I saw The Rise of Skywalker for the first time in the theater, I was in such denial. I watched this movie and I was sitting there like, oh my god, like it's not because they kind of rewrote The Last Jedi. It's more the fact that the movie was so safe and so utterly bland in a lot of ways. Not everything, and I'll get to some things that I really love about this movie. And as I've watched the movie more and more, I watched the movie like 4 or 5 times since I saw it in the theater, and I like it more every time. But the first time I watched this movie, I was so massively disappointed. I'd never been that disappointed in a Star Wars movie ever. And it made me feel so sad. So what I was saying on fan reception of this movie, there are fans who probably love this movie because it ignores or rewrites The Last Jedi, but then there's also fans that are like, no, The Last Jedi was a better written movie, and then they're making this safe movie, and that's where I fall. This movie is just really, really safe. It doesn't do anything, really. It doesn't have any risks. It's very much so a course correction to please the biggest demographic of people being negative. This movie to me, compared to The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, is objectively the worst in terms of directing, writing, and the acting's good, but it's a movie that it's so much they're just putting all this stuff in there to please fans. And I know The Force Awakens did that too. But The Force Awakens had a way better story and a way better executed story. And The Last Jedi wasn't really about fanfare. It was about fully making a story, evolving these characters. I guess I'm more annoyed that J.J. Abrams came back, even though I love The Force Awakens. Because if you put these two different directors, and then you put the director back, so the second movie looks like it doesn't really exist, because it's kind of sandwiched between a movie by a director, J.J. Abrams, who's very nostalgic about nostalgia, and then you got Rian Johnson, who's like giving these ideas of what if we move on, and they don't mesh. If they had Colin Trevorrow back and did it, I wondered if I would have liked it a little more, because I've read parts of that script, and that script sounded so much more original. The original script for Episode 9, which was tentatively called Duel of the Fates, which is a cool title, because it harkens back to Episode's 1 score, Duel of the Fates. But it's just so weird just having this director come back and do 2 movies, and then the middle movie is basically just written out. And I don't think it's written out as a anger to the fans. I think it's written out because they're such different directors and filmmakers. They're not like J.J. Abrams isn't trying to be complex with this. He's not trying to say let's move on. He's like nostalgia, let's go back to nostalgia. And Rian Johnson is like, no, we're gonna make something more than that. So it's just so weird seeing these two directors mesh together. And I'm not the only one. Critics really were annoyed at this movie too for virtually ignoring all of The Last Jedi's like revelations and reveals. But to be fair, even though it's kind of rewritten, it's like you look at second chapters in any trilogy where they have something that tells this is the truth, and then the next movie will negate that. So I'm not thinking that they're doing this out of spite for The Last Jedi. I think that they're just trying to be safe because fans bitched about it too much. Because you can be a selfish person and bitch about a movie enough, and the studios are going to puss out. And that to me really bothers me. So The Force Awakens was about a mystery, and then The Last Jedi was about revelations and change. And then The Rise of Skywalker is about Palpatine. Nothing has changed. Oh, you didn't like that Rey was a nobody? Well, Palpatine. Oh, you didn't like that Snoke was killed? Well, he was created by Palpatine. Oh, you didn't like Rose Tico? Well, let's put her in this movie for a full minute of this movie. And they were gonna apparently put her in more of the movie with scenes of integrated Carrie Fisher footage, but then they realized, no, that's not going to work. We don't have enough footage of Carrie Fisher before she died. So Rose Tico, it looks like they're just, again, pleasing the fans, because a lot of fans hated Rose Tico. So they're like, oh, we're just going to ignore her. Because, and they say that they weren't trying to, but the way that they executed it sounds like they were still. And you got you got Chris Terrio, who wrote Argo, which is a good movie, I think, from what I remember. And then he wrote Justice League, Batman v Superman, and this. And 3 out of 4 movies. Whew, that I don't get how they got the writer of Batman v Superman to come and do this movie. I think that's really strange. Oh, you didn't like Luke in The Last Jedi? Well, here's this bland, generic Jesus version of Luke that Mark Hamill phones in his performance. Like, seriously, watch any scene in The Last Jedi, a movie that Mark Hamill did not like his portrayal as, like Rian Johnson's interpretation of.
I failed. Because I was Luke Skywalker. Jedi Master.
Ben Solo will turn.
Rey, don't do this.
What you have learned. Strength, mastery, but weakness, folly, failure also. Yes, failure most of all.
And between it all,
balance and energy. A force. That same force.
and this is the lesson. That force does not belong to the Jedi. To say that if the Jedi die, the light dies is vanity. Can you feel that?
I feel something.
You feel it?
Yes, I feel it.
That's the force.
Really?
Wow, it must be really strong
Oh,
of
I've
you.
never felt any...
You meant reach out like.
The rebellion is reborn today. The war is just beginning. And I will not be the last Jedi.
And then look at this movie.
A Jedi's weapon deserves more respect. What are you doing? Because you're a Palpatine. Leia knew it too. I was wrong.
Just, it looks like he does not care. It looks like he's sitting here like, wow, I'm in this. Okay, I didn't like the last movie for what it did, but that movie was a better movie. I'm just here as Force Ghost, telling Rey to go and fight her grandpappy. So, there's a difference between this movie and the last two where I'm not really going to talk about characters in depth, because there's really no depth in this movie. They can pretty much be summed up in one sentence each. Rey learns she's a Palpatine and saves the day. Kylo Ren fights with Rey and is redeemed and dies at the end. Finn screams Rey a lot and may be force sensitive. Poe used to be a spice runner. Leia dies to save Ben. Luke tells Rey she's a Palpatine and lifts an X-Wing. Rose Tico does nothing because she's barely in the movie. Chewie dies but doesn't. C-3PO loses his memory. Lando says and does Lando things. This movie also adds a lot of new characters to the franchise, and I think I like them fine, but they don't do much. Again, this movie is so quickly paced in a way where they're trying to say, this movie isn't as well written as The Last Jedi or Force Awakens. We're not going to spend time with these characters. We're just going to rush you to all the big moments where you're going to be like, ooh, Palpatine's here. Or, ooh, look at the Falcon with all these, every vehicle in the galaxy just fighting with them. Or moments like that. And I think that the movie has characters that I like that are new. Like, I like Jonna, and I like Zori Bliss. Like, I like these characters, but they don't have besides like a couple moments of dialogue, they don't have much to them. They're kind of just, it's kind of just like, look, new characters, they have cool designs, and that's it. Like Dio, for instance, Dio the droid. It's like you got another droid. You had BB-8 in The Force Awakens, and in all three of these, and then you had the Porgs, and then you have Dio. And Dio, I think, is the weakest one out of all three of these new cute side characters, because he's fine. He says no thank you, but that's it. But I gotta give credit to Babu Frick. Love Babu Frick. That guy is hilarious.
Hi, Babu Frick.
Also, the Knights of Ren, who were established and mentioned in The Force Awakens and were not in The Last Jedi at all, are in this movie, and you learn nothing about them. They're literally just video game bosses. There's nothing that you know. Like, where it literally does not mention their names or anything. They just have intimidating designs. And again, all these new characters are here, but none of them have like anything to establish that they're characters. They're just caricatures. Like, they're just images of like, they're cool looking design characters, but they have nothing to them. They're just fight, and there's not any depth to it like the other two movies. The movie also has one of the biggest problems for me, unlike the last two movies, in which this movie is incredibly convenient. Rey's parents are killed by a guy who has a dagger, who, whenever they get the dagger, they have to stand on the exact spot on the moon of Endor, on the Endor location, and they've got to stand in the exact spot, hold the dagger out, and the dagger will show the precise location where she has to go to the Death Star, and then they also meet Lando conveniently on this planet where they are searching for the blade, and then conveniently Lando and Luke went to go and search for this blade for the guy who killed Rey's parents. Very, very convenient. The movie also does add things that are in other Star Wars movies, but are not important, or not really like in depth or detailed on, where like you'll see these in other Star Wars movies, and this movie has to do it because it's a Star Wars movie. Like whenever the Emperor lets out one of the Star Destroyers with the Death Star cannon on it, it destroys that Kijimi planet. And we were on this planet for like 10 minutes, and I guess it's saying that Zori Bliss and Babu Frick died, but they didn't because Zori Bliss said she was going to leave. So they have the Death Star destroying planet scene, but it doesn't feel like anything matters. You don't know any of these characters besides Zori Bliss and Babu Frick, and she already said she's leaving the planet, so who do you care about all these random people? You care more in A New Hope because Leia just knows that this is her family on there. Now, there is one thing in this movie that I don't know if I could ever forgive, and I'm feeling like a bad Star Wars fanboy here, complaining enough, because I am complaining. That moment at the end of the movie where Chewie gets his medal, God, I'm going to sound like those people in those clips I put in the beginning of the video, but Chewie gets his medal from A New Hope, because in A New Hope they had the goof where the filmmaking that they didn't give him a medal. So 42 years later, he finally gets his medal from Maz Kanata, and it's shot so cheesily that it's literally saying, fanboys, look, shove it in your face. This is the medal that we didn't give Chewie because he didn't get the medal because it was a film mistake. So we're being meta and adding in this medal. Look at this medal that Chewie got. Isn't that awesome? God, that's the one moment in this movie where I was like, I can't. That was one of the most cringiest, shitty things I've ever seen in a fanboy, in a movie like this with fanboy moments. I was like, that is the most insane thing I've ever seen. The movie isn't terribly made. It's just very convenient and not written very well. And it's also a movie that's too safe. It falls into that category of, we made The Force Awakens, which was pretty safe. It was a fun time. And then you get The Last Jedi, which was not safe. And then you look at this movie, and it's like, oh, we had people complain because we tried to do something different than the last one, whether you like it or not. We're going to make this movie extremely safe and just not give any risks. It also felt very rushed, too. It felt like they didn't have time to make this movie. It really felt like they rushed it quick. So now I want to talk about, after complaining for a while, because I don't like complaining, but it happened in this video, because I just felt so passionate about that. I guess like other fans did for other Star Wars movies. So to be fair, I'm being a hypocrite. But there are things in this movie that I really do like a lot. Rey and Kylo Ren. I really, really like what they did with them. With the acting, really, really extremely well done, like the other two movies. I love the fact that they continue on with Rian Johnson's idea of Rey and Kylo Ren using the Force connection. I think that is so cool that they brought that in. One of the only things they brought in from The Last Jedi. But I really love the fact that they brought in the connection of Rey and Kylo Ren, because that is such an incredible storytelling mechanic of Rey and Kylo Ren being galaxies away from each other and just interacting with each other and learning about each other, while both of them are in The Last Jedi telling secrets about each other and showing both of them turning towards Rey towards the dark side a little bit and Kylo Ren towards the light a little bit. And I love how in this movie it continues that. Their first scene where they use the Force connection together is really fantastic.
Palpatine wants you dead.
Serving another master.
No. I have other plans. I offered you my hand once. You wanted to take it. Why didn't you?
You could have killed me. Why didn't you?
You can't hide, Rey. Not from me.
I see through the cracks in your mask. You're haunted. You can't stop saying what you did to your father.
Do you still count the days since your parents left? Such pain in you. Such anger. I don't want to have to kill you. I'm going to find you, and I'm going to turn you to the dark side. When I offer you my hand again, you'll take it.
We'll see.
Even though I don't like the reveal that Rey's a Palpatine, I really love that moment where Ben tells her, because it makes complete sense that Ben is the one to tell her that. He's the one who has nurtured her, and they have both formed this bond. And he, the one telling you that, is really well done, even though I don't like the reveal.
I know the rest of your story.
You're lying.
I never lied to you. Your parents were no one. They chose to be.
Also, this is one of my absolute favorite moments in the movie, too. The moment where Rey and Kylo Ren, after Rey gets the Wayfinder in the Death Star ruins, and Kylo Ren is talking to her about, you can't go back to Leia now. It's incredible.
Look at yourself. You wanted to prove to my mother that you were a Jedi, but you've proven something else. You can't go back to her now. Like I can't. The dark side is in our nature. Surrender to it.
Then they have that fight on the Death Star ruins, which I think is fine. It's not as great as I thought. Like, I still think it's fine, them fighting on the Death Star ruins, but that moment where Leia connects to Ben and Rey impales him, I think connecting to the beginning, or connecting to Force Awakens is great, because she impales Ben like Ben does Han Solo. Leia dies. She dies, loses the will to live, I guess, kind of like Padme, where she loses the will to live just to teach Ben this lesson that he can be saved. She's the one who saves him, and also Han Solo saves him as well with the memory.
I did want to take your hand. Ben's hand.
But that moment of Rey impaling him and then saving him, even though it's like, what's the point of this? You're just saving him again. That makes logical sense, because Rey is showing Ben that he can be redeemed, and she did what he did to his father, and then his mother just died. And I love that moment. And then Rey escapes, and then you have that incredible moment with Ben and Han Solo, and it's a moment that you think on paper wouldn't work, like just talking to his memory, but it works very well because of the acting.
I miss you, son.
son is dead.
No. Kylo Ren is dead. My son is alive.
She's gone.
Your mother's gone. But what she stood for, what she fought for, that's not gone.
I love how effective this form of redemption is for Ben, even though I don't know if I would have loved in the long run having Ben be redeemed. But I really do love this way of redemption of him, because his father, he says verbatim, whenever he's talking to his father, this is what he says in The Force Awakens, and he does this and redeems himself, and it's fantastic. It works very, very well. So Rey goes back to Octu and destroys the ship, and she goes and is about to throw the lightsaber, and then this is some really cringy things. She throws it, and then Luke catches it, Force Ghost Luke, and he says a Jedi's lightsaber should be treated with more respect. And I like in concept the idea that Luke Skywalker at the beginning of The Last Jedi didn't want to help because of all this stuff he's doing. He's recreating the cycle again. He created Ben, he's recreating the cycle of the Jedi. He's failed just like the Jedi have in The Last Jedi. And then at the end of the movie, he saves everybody. He's the one that dies, and Rey becomes the New Hope in the end of The Last Jedi. And in this one, I really do think it's a cringy line, but I do like the idea of that Luke Skywalker has changed since he has died. He did change at the end of The Last Jedi. He learned his lesson. He stood up to Ben and he saved everybody like Luke Skywalker does. And I think that it works, even though it's a cringy line of saying, because it's just so on the nose. Like, a Jedi's lightsaber should be treated with more respect. You understand that fans didn't like that. But fans also don't realize that in The Last Jedi, Luke Skywalker did still go and save the day at the end. He still did the right thing, the thing Luke Skywalker does. He just had to have the arc. And then I thought it was interesting. I do like the idea that Rey says, I'm gonna isolate myself like you did to Luke, and Luke says I was wrong. And then he says that it was fear keeping me here. And I guess logically that does make sense for the next step, because he was in fear of going back to everybody because he created the new villain of the galaxy, Kylo Ren, and then he was scared to go back. And then at the end of The Last Jedi, he stands up and does it, and I think that is great. And I think that it's a great learning lesson for Rey, like in this movie where she doesn't want to go back, but he tells her, you've got to do it. This is how it should go as a Jedi. And I just like seeing his views change back to normal. I do like the idea that Leia was trained, and then she stopped being trained whenever she realizes in a vision that her son would die, and somebody else would carry on her legacy. And I think that kind of writing is cool, because it's like Rey is the continuation of the person who took her lightsaber, and Luke gives it to her in this movie. And I think it's a really cool way of establishing Leia was a Jedi. Basically, she was almost fully trained. And I really thought that was a cool character moment for Leia, because again, Carrie Fisher is not in this movie except for footage. So I like the idea that they built on that Leia was trained, and again, in The Last Jedi, they had the idea that like she was trained because she pulled herself back into the ship. I think that it works elaborating on it in this movie. Now I want to talk about the last act, because Palpatine, it's the fight against Palpatine. And it's also the fight in the sky with all the other ships and blah, blah, blah. And that part I thought was just so incredibly Star Wars that it's really forgettable, with Poe fighting all the Death Star ships. Like, there was nothing really at stake. It was just really boring. And the stuff with Rey and Palpatine, I think, is really good, even though I don't really love Palpatine being in this movie. Honestly, if she wasn't his granddaughter, it would have made a difference to me, but I feel like she didn't have to be connected. She could have been a nobody, like they said in The Last Jedi. She could have still been special. She didn't have to be part of a bigger cause. Like, she was just her in The Last Jedi. She was just a special person. But no, she's got to be part of a powerful being. She can't just be special on her own. I do love the fact that Palpatine says to Rey whenever he's taunting her, like, you're weak like your parents. And I love how Rey says, my parents were strong, because she realizes that they were killed by Palpatine, or sent to execute them. And she says her parents are strong, and he says, you have nobody, you have no family. And then I love the shot of Ben being redeemed, coming on to Exegol and going to fight with her, because Ben is her family. And this actually does give me chills between them both, because they've got such a great set of chemistry together. Rey and Kylo Ren, they're just so great together that even though they've been such enemies throughout these 3 movies, but also such companions, it's really great. The scene where you have Rey up to Palpatine, and Palpatine's like, you must kill me because it's Return of the Jedi again, and he's like, you must kill me, and then she puts her lightsaber up, and I really love so much that she puts it behind her, and then it's gone. Ben has it and is fighting off the knife. Gives me chills. There are moments in this movie that really, really work. I really love some things about this movie. Just the Rey and Kylo Ren stuff is so damn good. It sucks that Ben just gets like knocked through into a chasm though, and then it's Rey just fighting on her own. But I really love the fact that this is the inner fanboy in me. This is the fanboy stuff I like, because I love the prequels, and I feel like the sequel trilogy doesn't have much prequel references. I mean, it does. It still exists in the universe, but hearing on screen whenever Rey has been trying to connect with the Jedi past, like in the movie throughout, and Rey says, be with me, and like goes up to the stars, and it's of course the star template of like A New Hope. Like it literally is the star system and how it looks from the opening titles of A New Hope. But you hear the voices of all the Jedi past, and it gives me chills. It's the fanboy moments I like, where you hear Anakin Skywalker, Hayden Christensen, you hear Obi-Wan Kenobi, you hear Mace Windu, Qui-Gon Jinn, Ahsoka, and Kanan Jarrus, like even characters from like the Clone Wars and Rebels shows who are very popular, but I didn't expect them to be in this movie voiced. That's so cool. And I just love that connection between the whole franchise. It gives me chills, and it feels like a moment that is more warranted than something like Chewie gets a medal. So I like that, and I liked her fighting Palpatine with both lightsabers, Luke and Leia's lightsabers. I think that's cool. And I liked she kills him, and then she dies, and of course, because this movie has people dying 3 different times, the snake monster is injured, so Rey heals it. She kills Kylo Ren, but then saves him. Then I love this reverse where like Rey's dead and Ben comes out of the chasm and comes and heals her enough to where he dies. But they get a kiss before they die, so Reylo fans be praised. But I thought that was a great moment of them just fully, it was fully the ending of these 2 characters, and I thought that they did a great job of that. I also love that since Leia died for Ben, whenever Ben fades away, Leia fades away. And I thought that was such a nice, poetic way of her and him dying together. Now, I'm kind of going to skip past, like, the whatever, they're all happy, like, ending, like Return of the Jedi, because I want to mention the last scene of the movie where Rey, it goes to Tatooine, and she buries Luke and Leia's lightsabers, which was an idea that I guess is similar to The Last Jedi, where they're moving on. So I did like that, and I liked the fact that at first I didn't like this. Whenever Rey sees that random lady in Tatooine, and she's like, who are you? And she says, Rey. And then the woman says, Rey who? And then she looks over to spirits of Luke and Leia. They're smiling at her, and she says, Rey Skywalker. And at first, the first time I saw this movie, I was like, that is really cheesy. But as I've watched this movie more and more, I really do think that scene really is a good scene, because it plays to your expectations that you were thinking Rey was going to be a Skywalker all along, but she's a Palpatine. And I like the fact that she sheds her past and calls herself Rey Skywalker, as bringing the Skywalker legacy to continue, but also she's not really a Skywalker. I think that's really clever. But I can't argue with things where I'm just like, this negates The Last Jedi, but it also negates like the other movies. This movie really does a good job of rewriting everything and negating a lot of stuff from not just The Last Jedi, but from other movies. It brings back the Emperor, which kind of squanders Anakin's redemption arc. Like, he is redeemed at the end of the movie because the Return of the Jedi, because Luke saves him, and that's the end of it. But then the Emperor comes back again, so it's like Anakin didn't do anything. It's a movie where it does negate all these things to make the movie pretty bland, despite things I really love, like the Rey and Kylo Ren stuff. But besides that, the movie just kind of is whatever for me. Like, there's things that I really love, Rey and Kylo Ren, and everything else is just whatever, forgettable, and it's not very well made as opposed to The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi. It's unfortunate, but it's still fun. I still have fun with it, but I can't help but notice the actual like critical things about this movie that annoy me so much. It's just really a byproduct of fans were annoyed with the last movie, but also we gotta be as Star Warsy as possible and safe as possible, so nobody can even think about being annoyed about a movie that's different. None of these characters in the movie really have any consequence or change besides Ben. That's really all. The trilogy is complete, and it's weird just talking about this trilogy as a whole because I really love things about all three of these movies. And again, The Rise of Skywalker is easily the weakest link, but still, I think that this is still a fun trilogy. I think the first two are great, but this one is okay, but has some great moments. It's a shame that it wasn't as great as the last two, but I can still go with the moments that I liked, but still it negates just a lot of stuff from everything. I really couldn't see Rey being a Palpatine in The Force Awakens. I really couldn't see Rey being a Palpatine in Last Jedi because they made the point to say that she's a nobody. So there wasn't a lot of vision for any of these three movies. And it's just a weird thing having one director do two movies and have one sandwich in the middle that has a totally different idea than the other two, which is not the director's fault. It's just they just had no cohesive plan, which is unfortunate because this trilogy I think I still enjoy, I still like. I just have problems with The Rise of Skywalker. It's often debated by fans which one's better, which movies people love, people hate. And I think Star Wars is a franchise I still love. This one is not going to ruin it for me. I just, at first watch, was annoyed at it. But still, this trilogy is really solid and really enjoyable. And I'm glad I got to talk about them in depth. And I know this is a long-ass video, but if you stayed long enough, thank you guys. It's a fun trilogy that I'm fine with for the most part. Hey guys, if you like this video, consider checking out my other content. I review a majority of films that are pretty recent and also older films and mostly horror as well. Horror is my favorite genre, so I expect a lot of horror. And check out all my links down below. I have a link to Patreon. I have a link to Instagram, link to Twitter, link to my Facebook group, Horror Enthusiast 101, and to my own personal Facebook page, CDR Movie Reviews. And thank you for anybody who watched this video. Thanks for watching.